Hello folks, Jerry here and welcome back to the third part of the story of Racing Rivals. You know, it's been fun talking about the humble beginnings and eventually the meteoric rise of Racing Rivals, and you should totally check those videos out, but unfortunately, when there is a rise, there is also a fall. In this video, we'll be taking a look at the problems of Racing Rivals that I mostly glanced over in the previous episodes, and then we'll go ahead and check out the second worst update that the game ever got. Yeah, that's foreshadowing. Still though, I don't want to only talk about my favorite game of all time in a negative way, so throughout the video there's gonna be a couple of our favorite Racing Rivals YouTubers talking about their favorite memories from Racing Rivals. Also, keep in mind that while the glory days of the game were mostly over after the update we'll be talking about, the soul of the game was still there and it was fun to play, but I want to document every single aspect of Racing Rivals, the good and the bad. Enough delay, let's jump into it. So, we left off during the summer of 2016, and at that time Racing Rivals was my life. I spent hours making videos and deals and updating my sales posts every single day, but even at that point, at the game's absolute peak, there were unfortunately some not so good things about it, and by far the most notorious were the scammers. Trading in Racing Rivals was completely improvised because the developers didn't expect people to lose their cars or cash on purpose. That meant that in the deals you made, someone always had to give over their stuff first, and by going first you always risk the chance of getting scammed. I'm sure that every single one of you who played Racing Rivals back in the day got scammed at least once, and I was no exception. Throughout the many years I played this game, I do find it kinda shocking that I only got scammed once, and even more shockingly, it was literally during my first week of playing. So, when I started recording Racing Rivals, I got really lucky because, well, pretty much instantly people found my videos, and only a couple of days after, I was streaming Racing Rivals pretty much every single day. On those streams we had a lot of fun. I made quite a few friends like Bravoman, F-Savix and Ghost, but as a noob I also got given quite a bunch of cars which I was really thankful for. And one of the people who donated was no other than Mikey Fiash. He was the person that introduced me to the Evo, which I ended up racing for years after that. He gave me my first ever fully upgraded Evo 8. Mikey Fiash would also be the only person to ever successfully scam me in the game. He pretended to be F-Savix on a different account, and because I was naive, he took both my Z4 GT3 and my 4 GTR and then dipped. If by any chance, Mikey Fiash, you're watching, good job dude, you got me. Perhaps me getting scammed so early on was actually a good thing, because I was a lot more careful from that point on, and I eventually ended up making a few videos on how to protect yourself from getting scammed, which hopefully helped someone out. But eventually I was able to create a whole car selling business because of scammers, because even though I was selling my cars for above market price, people knew that I was never ever gonna scam them, and I didn't. I might have become an arrogant douchebag, but hey, at least my conscience was clean. Scamming was definitely a huge problem, but another one was a collapsing in-game economy. Let's just do some quick math here. So every single week on the Turf Wars, the top 100 teams would get a turf car, and there would be up to 20 people in each team. Do the math, and that is 2000 turf cars being given out every single week. Not to mention, with the introduction of the turf crates in mid-2016, the cars that were in it lost pretty much all value, and don't get me wrong, the turf crates were good because it allowed a lot more people to get their hands on some pretty cool cars, but it wasn't ideal for the stability of the market. Eventually, the market just got oversaturated and rare cars started to lose value. In-game cash became gold for Indonesian farmers who, throughout glitching and selling Racing Rivals cash, drove value from $15 in late 2014 to less than 50 cents during the summer of 2016. Add in the cloning, which was used to duplicate 95% of rare cars in the game, and you had a disaster of an economy that would only get worse. You would also meet an occasional cheater, and even though I don't think I ever lost my car to one, there were still a lot of light laggers trying to distract you by purposely delaying the start of the race. So clearly there were some problems with Racing Rivals, but in reality you kinda just got used to it, and the rest of the issues were, well, avoidable if you were careful. So fast forward to October of 2016 and the game was arguably better than ever, and to light up the mood, here is a couple of our favorite Racing Rivals YouTubers talking about their favorite memories from the game.
Yeah, I think my favorite thing about that game was just how simple it was. You just go in, load up, get into a car, and just go racing. That's just it. It was just so simple, such a simple game, especially back in 2014. Go ahead, get money, keep grinding, progress through either the campaign, you could trade cars, through pink slips. It's just such a good formula for the game, and that's something that can't be forgotten, especially nowadays with these racing games not even having this pink slip formula at all, just being mixed in. And that's just what separated Racing Rivals from any other racing game in existence.
Hey, iPolitely. My favorite memory from Racing Rivals would be making videos for anybody who watched them, and even if they didn't watch them, it was still a great time, meeting people in lobbies, talking to them, little smack talk here and there. It was all fun and games, and they changed my life. For one, financially, I didn't have to work for a couple years. No, for two, the connections I made were amazing. I still keep up with a lot of people to this day. Most of my Instagram followers are people from the Racing Rivals community. So I just want to thank everybody for all the support and all the great memories we all made through these years.
I have to say, my favorite memories of Racing Rivals is just opening crates, just from the beginning of when I started playing, just the suspense of not knowing what you're going to unlock and what you're going to get is just, it was what kept me in the game, I guess, this whole time, and got me into the community and got me making videos and all that stuff, and continued forward from there. So yeah, if I had to say, my favorite memories of Racing Rivals would be opening crates.
This next segment is gonna try to build up some suspense for the update that we'll be talking about, but to understand why the game changed so much so quickly, you guys might need some context. So 2016 was a pretty good year for Racing Rivals, but it wasn't doing nearly as good as in 2015. But why? To understand that, I actually had an amazing chance to interview Austin Ewan, the product manager of Racing Rivals, and he told me what was going on behind the scenes. Well, you can click in the top right corner to watch the full interview, but to summarize, in 2015, the management at Glue, who bought CA Games the year prior, promised bonuses to Racing Rivals developers if they surpassed the income projections for 2015. The developers sat down, talked, and decided to work their ass off for the entire year to surpass those projections, and they did. In 2015, Racing Rivals made $12 million more than the projections, projected. The team was excited to get the bonuses they were promised, but instead, all they got for working their ass off for the whole year was a cake. The original dev team clearly had a lot of passion, not just for Racing Rivals, but for cars in general, but as the original members of the team started leaving one by one, they were eventually replaced by people who just didn't have that same passion. Fast forwarding to the summer of 2016, a little game called CSR2 was released, and it blew everyone, including the Racing Rivals team, away with its graphics. So we had a perfect storm of people who didn't know what made Racing Rivals, and CSR2 releasing to pretty much only positive reviews, and as a result, in the late October of 2016, Racing Rivals got a massive update, the 6.0 update. Most people point out a different update as the update that killed Racing Rivals, but for me, the 31st of October of 2016 marked the end of the golden era of the game. I mean, Racing Rivals was never a great looking game, but it definitely was not a bad looking one either, and no one really played Racing Rivals for the graphics. No, we played and loved Racing Rivals because of the cars and the community that this game helped build. But on that day, the familiar familiar style of racing rivals was gone, being instead replaced by an overly blue user interface and a font which I can only describe as a mistake. To add insult to injury, when 6.0 released, the game was less than optimized. It was lagging heavily, and it would lag less if you turned off the so-called experimental graphics, but if you did, at least in my opinion, the game looked worse than it did before. Another thing that was added was the global chat, which instantly became the go-to place for scammers, so that feature was dead on arrival, but hey, looking on the bright side, at least we got to keep all of our cars, and well, 6.0 overall was a pretty bad update. They did add some good features like the daily goals. Also, the same week that 6.0 released, we finally got one of the most anticipated turf cars of all time, the Honda Civic Si-RE. The hype was insane and it quickly became one of the most expensive cars in the game, and it was actually a pretty good car. To go along with the Civic Si-RE, we actually got a whole Honda themed update. It was pretty similar to the BMW event we had the year prior, and some of the biggest highlights were a new king of D-Class, the Civic Type R Motorsports and the Civic Type R RE, a car which was so rare I was convinced it didn't even exist for a few months until I found one for sale. Everyone also got a free Civic Type R, which was pretty cool. The Honda event itself was intriguing enough, there were a couple of fantastic cars added, but it wasn't quite as exciting as the BMW event. Still though, pretty fun. In December of 2016, we actually got a few cool features with the release of the 6.1 update, namely the personal mechanic, which would automatically select the best parts to upgrade on your car, and it really sped up the process of maxing out your ride. It was pretty cool, but the other feature was even better, the test drive. In your garage, you now had an option to race your car without damaging it, and for me, who often raced a lot of different cars pretty much every day, it was actually a fantastic way to practice your launches and shifts without, well, taking a boost and damaging your car. So, there were still some cool features being added to the game, but before we continue, here's a few more cameos.
Honestly, bro, the best part and most memorable stuff about Racing Rivals to me is the whole community could be so toxic to one another on the track, but if somebody in their personal life was in need, everybody banded together to help them out. And as far as I'm concerned, that is what made me love the game and love the community and try to do everything that I could do to help the community out. It's just amazing how strangers can come together over a mobile video game and be so close and feel almost like family together, sometimes even closer than your blood family. But yeah, my most memorable moment would be when everybody banded together to turf for those that had tragedies in their life and just needed help from everybody.
I mean, you know, my favorite moment from Racing Rivals had to be mid-2017. When the times were great, and before, 7.0 had ever hit the shelves. It was great because everyone enjoyed the game. Maybe not 100%, but it was universally enjoyed by everyone, And I've gotta say, it really did help me turn into the person I am today. Cause being a YouTuber, I motivated and entertained people by the thousands, and that I could never forget,
I don't know if he needs another. I would, but that RT though. Nice. Nice. That's like the first time I've ever won.
With the personal mechanic and the test drive features, we also got some amazing new turf cars. Shoutouts to the Mazda RX-7 RE and the Ford GTR RE, but once the Honda crates were gone, we also got the Ferrari crates, and with the Ferrari crates we got the new quickest S-Class car, the Ferrari 550 Maranello, but we also got one of the worst cars in the game, the 575 GTC. We'll get to that one. The one car that was released during that time that I really want to highlight is no other than the car you saw in the thumbnail, the Ford Focus RS RE. This was actually a turf car released in March of 2017, but the developers messed up and didn't make the unwrapped Focuses paintable. People were pissed, and it resulted in everyone, and I mean everyone, getting a Ford Focus RS RE for free. The developers did previously give a few cars away, like the Cobra Jet, the Z4 GT3 and the Ford GTR, but the Ford Focus was a very fast R2 class car, and because everyone got one, it replaced the M3 GT2 as the quickest cheap car in the game, and it quickly became hated because a lot of people wanted to pink slip expensive cars in their Focuses. It was actually a pretty cool car though. One thing that I did forget to mention in the previous parts is that every single year the developers would have something prepared for us for April Fools. In 2016 we got the Top Fool Dragster, which was a great troll because you would either get a perfect launch or a traction loss, and nothing else. In 2015, 1 year before, we would get the Suteresa and the Bosuzoku, which were these over-the-top Japanese cars. That was even a Valentine's Day version of one of them, but in 2017 we got the Diamond Mystery Crate, which would only give out Volkswagen Golf Harlequins, which I'm not even mad, like that's actually really cool. Right after April Fools, we got a bit of a bigger update, so just like in Cartown the years prior, we actually got a lot of Fast and Furious themed cars to promote their new movie, The Fate of the Furious. Now, I rather wouldn't comment on the movie itself, because it sucked, but these cars were actually really cool, specifically the Ice Charger. We got a staggering amount of Dom's Chargers in Racing Rivals. We got the Off-Road Charger, the Steel Charger, the Matte Charger, the Gloss Charger, you get the point, but the only one that I really loved was the Ice Charger. This thing was fantastic to race, super consistent and very fast, being one of only a handful of R2s that could actually hit 6.6s. I didn't end up racing it a whole lot because they were super expensive, but it definitely deserves an honorable mention. Now, some of you might remember that I mentioned that I started dating my first girlfriend in September of 2016 as a direct result of me playing Racing Rivals, and as bizarre as that sounds, it's actually true. It was pretty weird, but on 28th of April of 2017, young Jerry had his first breakup, and for the first time in years, Racing Rivals wasn't the main thing on my mind anymore. Now, it was pretty rough. I did stop uploading for a few weeks, but at that point I did a lot of pink slipping off camera, and I actually came up with an idea for a video series. Basically, in 2017 there were hundreds of cars in different classes, and some classes were quite full, you know, having over 50 cars in some of them. And as I pink slipped cars like the Bentley GT3 and the 2017 Ford GT and the Ice Charger, I started wondering which of these cars are actually the best in the R2 class. I named the series R2 Breakdown, and in every episode I would get a different R2 class car, pink slip it and give my opinion on it. I made over 50 episodes of the R2 Breakdown, and in it I got the chance to pink slip almost all of the R2 class cars that Racing Rivals had to offer. I realized that some cars like the Ford GTR and the M6 GT3 were actually really good, the Z4 GT3 was always trash, but somehow the worst car ended up being the 575 GTC, which had zero redeeming qualities. The biggest surprise overall in the R2 Breakdown for me was the Google Play Acura NSX GT3. Now, there were a lot of different versions of the NSX GT3 in the game, and they all drove in a way that I didn't like, but the Google Play one was something special. It was by far the easiest to drive and the quickest, and it really got me thinking, what were some of the other cars that I never drove in Racing Rivals? Like I said, I pinked almost all of the R2 class cars in the game, but unfortunately I never made the final ranking for the series. So you guys let me know if you want to see the full ranking of the R2 Breakdown cars 5 years later, because I will make it if you guys want it. In June of 2017 we got the 6.3 update, which finally replaced the god-awful font, and you could now instantly upgrade all stage 1 and stage 2 parts at once, which definitely came in handy. The 6.4 update in August finally killed off the global chat, but it also introduced the smart tachometer, which showed you the best way to shift your car, which was quite handy for R2 breakdown because, well, I pinked different cars pretty much every day. That update unfortunately also added private friend lobbies where you could race your friends and trade in peace. I say unfortunately because you couldn't actually lobby jump anymore. You see, the max rating of the cars I raced at that time was just around the lobby limit, and it was a lot more difficult to find pink slips because the quickest lobby with a speed rating of 1690 was at that point filled only with Koenigseggs and Ford Focus RSs, of course, and most of the cars I raced barely got into that lobby and would be destroyed by pretty much any opponent. After I ran out of cars for the R2 class breakdown, I have decided to focus on the class below it, the R class. I made a couple of episodes of it, but unfortunately the lobby jumping restrictions completely killed that class, and I had a very hard time finding pink slips, and for a while I stopped uploading videos. We'll get to the reason why, but before we do, here's a couple of our final Racing Rivals YouTuber clips.
What up? It's Justin Hemmati. Hopefully y'all remember me way back from the squeaker days, back in like 2017, 2016, the good old days. So I would say that my favorite moment in Racing Rivals just has to be my first pink slip ever, because it just fully formed me into the pink slip addict that I once was, and it kind of just started off my whole YouTube thing. Pretty much how this pink slip went was I was in a Scion TC, fresh out of finishing campaign, like not that many upgrades, and I challenged a Honda S2000 and he raises to pinks, and I was like, oh shit. Heart was absolutely pumping. That's what I remember. I did it. I clicked let's race, just absolutely scared. I missed the launch completely and just fucked up the run, but the Honda actually spun, and just the rush of winning that pink slip was something that it's like a drug, you know? Like, I just can't get that high from anything other than just winning a car in pinks. Definitely thank you, Jerry, for having me in the video. Peace.
Hey Jerry, so DJMaslak here. I would say my favorite thing about Racing Rivals was definitely the idea to be able to race for pink slips. Especially classes that were way higher than the car you were in. I was pretty known for always, pinking with Stellas versus the higher classes like the BMW, GT3 or the GT2. I was always trying to win the cars that were maybe more rare, or the turf cars with slower cars, just to see if I could edge them out with performance. I definitely enjoy that the most about Racing Rivals, and definitely the turf wars too. The idea to battle other teams and have the privilege of turfing, on one of the best teams during the era was definitely a great experience, and I do miss that part about Racing Rivals, and hopefully they bring that game back.
At this point, I would like to take a moment to thank all of the people who submitted clips for this video. So, obviously, I did kind of put myself as the center of attention for the series, but Racing Rivals was as great as it was because of the community that these people helped build. So I'm sure that these people didn't only help me, but also you guys throughout some pretty interesting times, and that is honestly priceless. But let's get back to the reason why I stopped playing Racing Rivals back in 2017. So in August I passed my driver's license, and at that time I was hunting for my first car. At that point, I didn't work a day in my life, so this car would be bought exclusively with money I made from Racing Rivals, and my budget wasn't super high, but I was looking at cars like the Toyota Celica and the Mitsubishi Eclipse, but then I eventually settled on this. My 2005 Hyundai Tiburon was love at first sight. I grew up playing racing games, and finally having a car of my own, let alone this thing, which to me at least was really cool, was a fantastic feeling. It was fun to drive because it was a manual, it was cheap and reliable. If you guys are looking for a first car, I would really recommend you look at these. To me, it was a slow transition from video games into adulthood, but every time I looked at my car, I thought about Racing Rivals, and I did sell my Tibi 6 months ago and got myself a DS3, which is better in pretty much every way, but that Hyundai, dude, it's still my favorite car in the entire world. But let's get back to Racing Rivals, because even though I wasn't playing at the time, there were some cool things happening. For example, there was a pretty cool Christmas event at the end of 2017 where you would collect coal and toy cars, where you could later exchange them for a Civic Si RE and the Mitsubishi Evo 8 RE, which were up to that point the two of the most expensive cars in the game, which kinda drives home the point that the economy was screwed. There were even more cars you could win for free, like Cobra Jets and some Subarus, but there was also a 24-hour event where the top 3000 teams would get a car that the community wanted for years, the Nissan Skyline R34 RE. It did turn out to be one of the quickest R2 class cars, but almost everyone got one, so it wasn't that special. Also, most of them weren't pinkable. But after Christmas, the game really didn't get any interesting updates for over a month, and I didn't even play Racing Rivals at that time, but I know that a lot of people were quitting. I would have to say a lot of us just started to slowly outgrow the game, and while the game was still fun, it just didn't have the soul and the community that it had before the 6.0 update. As much as I hate to admit it, I was pretty sure that Racing Rivals was on borrowed time, but as it turns out, there was something going on behind the scenes, because the team was working on an update that would completely change Racing Rivals. It would be announced on the 14th of February of 2018, and oh boy, did it suck.